My daughter said, "You're embarrassing me," as she pulled away from my embrace outside the university gates, her cheeks flushed with shame as her boyfriend Brandon looked on with barely concealed disgust. The worn work boots on my feet and the grease stains on my uniform told a story she no longer wanted associated with her name. But when the morning newspaper landed on campus the next day with my photograph splashed across the front page, everything changed in ways none of us could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The spring rain drummed against the windows of Riverside Community Center as I pushed my maintenance cart down the familiar hallway, the wheels squeaking their usual protest against the polished linoleum floor. 22 years I'd walked these corridors, mopping spills, fixing broken fixtures, and keeping the building running for the hundreds of people who depended on this place every day. The work was honest, steady, and it had put food on the table and paid for Emma's education at the University of Oregon. Emma. My chest tightened thinking about our conversation the previous evening. Her graduation was approaching, and Brandon Wells had made it clear that my presence at the celebration dinner would be unwelcome. Not in those exact words, of course. Men like Brandon were too polished for direct cruelty. Instead, he'd suggested that perhaps I might be more comfortable staying home, given the sophisticated nature of the event and the prominent families who would be attending. The toolbox I carried had belonged to my father, Harold Sr., a man who taught me that dignity came from honest work and treating people with respect regardless of their station in life. The metal was dented and the paint worn smooth in places where 3 generations of Mitchell hands had gripped it. Emma used to love hearing stories about her grandfather, how he'd helped build half the houses in their old neighborhood, how neighbors would call him when they needed something fixed, because Harold Mitchell's work was something you could count on. Now she seemed ashamed of everything that toolbox represented. The community center buzzed with its usual morning activity. Rosa Martinez was setting up chairs in the main hall for the senior citizens breakfast program, her efficient movements guided by years of practice. She caught my eye and smiled, the kind of genuine warmth that had become rare in my interactions with people lately. "Morning, Harry. How's our college graduate doing?" "Nervous about finals," I replied, not mentioning the growing distance between Emma and me. Rosa had been at the center almost as long as I had, working her way up from volunteer to director through sheer determination and a heart bigger than the building itself. She understood what it meant to work for something meaningful, even when others couldn't see the value. The morning routine continued around me as I checked the boiler room and replaced a flickering light bulb in the children's playroom. Mrs. Thompson arrived with her grandson Carlos, who always waved at me with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster. These small interactions sustained me more than Emma realized. This wasn't just a job to me. It was a place where I belonged and where my contributions mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, can we talk tonight? Important." The message carried the weight of something significant, though I couldn't tell whether it was good news or another conversation about how my presence might complicate her new life with Brandon. The Wells family lived in West Hills, where houses sat on manicured lots like monuments to success. I'd driven through that neighborhood once when Emma first started dating Brandon, curious about the world she was entering. The contrast with our small apartment in southeast Portland couldn't have been sharper. Where we had bus routes and corner markets, they had private driveways and landscaping services. Where we had neighbors who knew each other's names and troubles, they had privacy gates and security systems. Brandon's father, Richard Wells, owned a chain of upscale restaurants throughout the Pacific Northwest. His mother, Victoria, sat on the boards of various cultural organizations and charity foundations. They moved in circles where summer homes and European vacations were normal conversation topics, where a person's value was measured by their portfolio and their address. I'd met them exactly once when Emma brought me to a brief coffee meeting downtown. The encounter lasted 30 minutes, but every moment radiated their discomfort with my presence. They asked polite questions about my work at the community center, but their eyes kept finding my calloused hands and the small scar on my forehead from a workplace accident years earlier. By the time we parted ways, it was clear that I represented everything they hoped their son would move beyond. Emma's transformation had been gradual, but unmistakable. The girl who used to proudly introduce me to her high school friends as my dad who fixes everything had become a young woman who scheduled our phone calls and chose restaurants where we were unlikely to encounter anyone from her university crowd. The enthusiasm she once showed for visiting me at the community center had faded, replaced by excuses about studying and social commitments. I understood the pressure she felt. Brandon's world offered opportunities I could never provide. Internships at prestigious companies, connections that could launch her career, social status that would open doors throughout her life. What parent wouldn't want their child to have access to those advantages? But the cost seemed to be erasing the parts of herself that I'd helped shape, the values we'd built together during the years when it was just the two of us against the world. The afternoon brought its usual challenges: a clogged drain in the women's restroom, a burned-out projector bulb in the meeting room, and a heating unit that decided to start making ominous rattling sounds. Each problem was familiar territory, solved with patience and the right tools applied in the right way. There was satisfaction in making things work again, and being the person others could depend on when systems broke down. Rosa found me replacing filters in the air conditioning unit around 3 o'clock. "Harry, I wanted to run something by you before you leave today. We got approved for that expansion project I've been pushing for. New job training center, expanded childcare facilities, the works." The news should have excited me. More space meant more opportunities for the families who depended on the center's services. But expansion also meant change. And change often meant that long-time employees like me became expendable. Younger workers with different skill sets, more education, better presentation skills. "That's wonderful, Rosa. The community really needs those services." She studied my face with the perceptiveness that made her such an effective director. "Harry, you know you're part of this place's foundation, right? Whatever changes come, we'll need people who understand what this center means to the neighborhood." Her words offered comfort, but I'd seen enough organizations modernize to know that good intentions didn't always translate into job security. The world was moving faster than men like me could sometimes follow, and the skills that had served me well for 2 decades might not be enough for whatever came next. The drive home took me through familiar streets lined with modest houses and small businesses that had anchored the community for generations. This was Emma's world, too, once upon a time. She'd learned to ride her bike on these sidewalks, sold lemonade at the corner during summer breaks, volunteered at the community center during high school because she believed in helping others. Now, she saw these same streets as limitations to escape, rather than foundations to build upon. My apartment felt smaller than usual as I prepared dinner and waited for Emma's call. The walls were lined with photographs documenting her journey from kindergarten graduation to university acceptance, each image marking another step away from the life we'd shared together. Her mother had died when Emma was 6, leaving me to navigate single parenthood with more love than expertise. The community center had become our extended family, providing stability and support when we needed it most. The irony wasn't lost on me that the place Emma now found embarrassing had been instrumental in creating the opportunities she was embracing. The after-school programs, the mentorship connections, the scholarship information Rosa had shared with us. The community center had invested in Emma's future long before Brandon Wells entered her life. When my phone finally rang, Emma's voice carried the strained politeness she'd developed for our recent conversations. "Dad, I need to tell you something about graduation. Brendan's parents want to host a celebration dinner, and it's going to be quite formal. His father's business partners will be there, some important people from the university administration." I waited for the rest, though I already knew where this was heading. "The thing is, it's really more of a networking event than a family celebration. Brandon thinks it might be better if you didn't attend. Nothing personal, just that the conversation will be focused on business and career connections that might not be relevant to you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The words hit exactly as intended, polite and devastating. 22 years of supporting her dreams, and I was being uninvited from celebrating their realization because I might not fit the image she wanted to project? I see, I managed, though my voice felt thick with emotions I couldn't quite name. Dad, please don't be upset. We can have our own celebration, just the two of us, somewhere nice but more relaxed. This dinner is really for Brandon's career, not about me personally. Even her explanation stung. As if my presence would somehow damage the man she loved. As if 22 years of being her father could be set aside for the convenience of people who'd known her for less than 2 years. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, looking at the toolbox on the counter, thinking about the conversation I'd never had with Emma about why I'd really chosen to work at the community center all these years. Some stories were too complicated for casual telling, and some sacrifices were too personal to use as weapons in arguments about respect and belonging. Tomorrow would bring another day of maintenance requests and small repairs, of being useful in ways that didn't require explanation or justification. But tonight I felt the weight of being a father whose love had become an embarrassment, whose presence had become a problem to be managed rather than a blessing to be celebrated. The newspaper would arrive in the morning, as it had every day for decades, carrying news of a world much larger than my small apartment and daily routines. Neither Emma nor I could have imagined that this particular morning's headlines would change everything we thought we understood about worth, legacy, and the true measure of a life well lived. Sleep eluded me completely that night. I found myself standing at the kitchen window at 3 in the morning, watching the empty street through rain-streaked glass. The conversation with Emma replayed endlessly in my mind, each word cutting deeper with repetition. 22 years of shared memories, and now I was being politely erased from the most important moment of her academic life. The decision crystallized, somewhere between the sleepless hours of darkness and the gray dawn light filtering through my apartment windows. If Brandon Wells and his family thought they could simply exclude me from Emma's graduation celebration, they were about to discover that Harold Mitchell didn't disappear quite so easily. There had to be a way to be present for my daughter's triumph, even if it meant finding an alternative path to witness it. The community center felt different when I arrived that morning, charged with new possibility. Rosa was already in her office, reviewing applications for the expansion project funding. Her door stood open, and she looked up when I knocked on the frame. "You're early again, Harry. Everything all right?" I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "Rosa, I need to ask you something unusual. Do you still have connections at the university?" Her eyebrows raised with curiosity. "Several. The social work department? Community outreach programs, volunteer coordination? Why?" "Emma's graduation is next weekend, and there's a situation. I was wondering if there might be any way for me to be involved in the ceremony somehow. Not as a guest, but maybe as support staff or volunteer help." Rosa set down her papers and studied my face with the careful attention she reserved for serious matters. "Harry, what's going on? This sounds like more than just wanting good seats." The whole story spilled out. Emma's growing distance, Brandon's dismissive attitude, the celebration dinner from which I'd been tactfully excluded. Rosa listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "That's unacceptable," she said when I finished. "You've sacrificed everything for that girl's education. You belong at her graduation." I don't want to cause problems for Emma, but I also can't just sit home while she celebrates the achievement we worked toward together for 18 years. Rosa reached for her phone. "Dr. Martinez in Student Services owes me a favor. Last year we provided emergency housing for 3 of her students who got displaced by that apartment fire. Let me make some calls." While Rosa worked her network of contacts, I threw myself into the morning maintenance routine with unusual intensity. The repetitive tasks of cleaning and repair helped quiet the anxious energy building in my chest. Each fixed problem felt like a small victory, preparation for whatever larger challenge lay ahead. The answer came faster than I'd dared hope. Rosa found me in the basement checking the water heater around noon, her face bright with success. "Harry, we're in luck! The university uses outside contractors for graduation setup and event support. They need additional crew members for the weekend, especially people with maintenance and technical skills. Dr. Martinez can get you added to the list." My heart jumped.
You're serious? Completely. You'd be working behind the scenes, handling logistics, equipment setup, crowd management support. The pay is decent, and you'd have access to areas where family members can't go. You'd see everything. The irony was perfect. Brandon Wells couldn't exclude me from the celebration dinner, but he couldn't prevent the university from hiring qualified workers for their graduation ceremony. I would be there for Emma's moment of triumph, even if she didn't know it. What do I need to do? Be at the campus facilities office Monday morning at 8. They'll handle the paperwork and give you your assignment. Dr. Martinez specifically requested you for the main ceremony setup crew. That afternoon, I called Emma to let her know I'd accepted her decision about the dinner. The relief in her voice was unmistakable, though it stung to hear how grateful she sounded to avoid the awkwardness of defending my presence to Brandon's family. Thanks for understanding, Dad. I know this is hard, but it really is better this way. I want you to be happy, sweetheart. That's all I've ever wanted. I love you, Dad, and after all this graduation craziness is over, we'll have our own celebration. Just us, like old times. The promise felt hollow, but I accepted it graciously. She didn't need to know about my alternative plans. This would be my gift to her, my way of being present for her achievement without complicating her new life. Monday morning brought a different kind of nervousness as I reported to the university facilities office. The campus buzzed with pre-graduation energy, students and families arriving for the ceremony still 5 days away.
I felt like an intruder at first, until I met the other crew members and realized many of them were people like me, working parents and community members hired to help manage the university's biggest event of the year. The supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Janet Chen, assigned me to the main auditorium setup crew. My job would involve arranging chairs, setting up sound equipment, managing crowd flow, and handling any technical problems that arose during the ceremony itself. The work required both physical capability and problem-solving skills, exactly the combination I'd developed through years at the community center. You'll be stationed backstage mostly, Janet explained, showing me around the massive auditorium where Emma would receive her diploma. We need someone reliable who can think on their feet when equipment fails or logistics get complicated. The space was magnificent, with soaring ceilings and elegant architecture that spoke to the weight of academic tradition. Standing on the stage where Emma would walk to receive her degree, I felt the full significance of the moment we'd been working towards since her first day of kindergarten. Training continued through the week, each day bringing new responsibilities and growing familiarity with the graduation procedures. I learned the timing of every segment, the order of academic processions, the precise choreography that would transform hundreds of individual achievements into a unified celebration of learning and accomplishment. The other crew members accepted me easily once they saw I can handle the work. Many of them had children who'd graduated from various colleges, and they understood the pride and emotion that came with seeing your child reach such a milestone. Their stories reminded me that I wasn't alone in finding alternative ways to witness moments that mattered. By Thursday, I felt confident in my role and genuinely excited about the upcoming ceremony. Emma had no idea I would be there, working behind the scenes to ensure her graduation day proceeded smoothly. The secret added an element of anticipation that made even the mundane setup tasks feel meaningful. That evening, Emma called with updates about her final preparations. Her voice carried a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that reminded me of her childhood excitement before Christmas morning. I can't believe it's actually happening, Dad. 4 years of studying and now I'm about to graduate. I'm so proud of you, Emma. Everything you've accomplished, all the hard work and dedication, you've earned this moment. I wish I could, she started, then stopped herself. I'm glad we'll have our own celebration afterward. Maybe this is better. More personal. The pause told me everything I needed to know. Part of her wished I could be there for the official ceremony, but the pressure from Brandon's world had made that seem impossible. Tomorrow, I would give her both. My presence at her graduation and the social simplicity she thought she needed. Friday night, I prepared my work clothes with unusual care. The navy blue polo shirt and khakis that marked me as university event staff would be my uniform for witnessing Emma's greatest academic achievement. The outfit might not be as formal as the suits Brandon's family would wear, but it represented something more important: the dignity of honest work and the determination of a father who refused to be excluded from his daughter's triumph. The toolbox sat on my kitchen counter, ready for whatever technical challenges the day might bring.
Inside it, tucked between the screwdrivers and electrical tape, I'd placed the small digital camera. If the opportunity arose, I wanted to capture the moment Emma received her diploma, a photograph for the private celebration we'd share later. The newspaper lay folded on my kitchen table, tomorrow's edition still hours from delivery.
Neither Emma nor I could have imagined that Saturday's headlines would transform our understanding of my presence at the graduation ceremony, turning what I'd planned as a secret act of love into something much more significant and public than either of us expected. Saturday morning would bring not just Emma's graduation, but revelations that would reshape how she saw her father's worth and the sacrifices he'd made for her future. The humble maintenance worker she'd grown embarrassed by was about to be recognized in ways that would make both of us reconsider what it meant to be proud of the life we'd built together. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of early spring, the kind of day that seemed designed for important moments. I pulled into the university parking lot at 5:30, joining a stream of early arriving crew members preparing for the day's ceremonies. The campus hummed with anticipatory energy, groundskeepers making final adjustments to landscaping, security personnel checking access points, and catering trucks unloading supplies for the numerous receptions planned throughout the day. Janet Chen met the setup crew at the main auditorium service entrance, her clipboard thick with schedules and contingency plans. The organized chaos of major event preparation unfolded around us as we received our final assignments and checked equipment one last time. My position backstage would give me perfect visual access to the ceremony while keeping me invisible to the audience. "Remember, people," Janet addressed the group, "this is their day. Our job is to make everything seamless so families can focus on celebrating their graduates. Any problems, radio immediately. No heroics, no improvising without clearance." The auditorium transformed before my eyes as hundreds of chairs materialized in perfect rows. Sound systems came online with crisp clarity, and banners unfurled to mark the formal dignity of academic achievement. Standing in the wings, I could see clear sight lines to the stage where Emma would receive her diploma in just a few hours. By 8 o'clock, family members began arriving for prime seating positions. Through the backstage monitor system, I watched parents and grandparents, siblings and friends, all dressed in their finest clothes to honor their graduates' accomplishments. The Welleses arrived fashionably late, Richard commanding attention in an expensive suit, while Victoria surveyed the auditorium with the critical eye of someone accustomed to evaluating venues for social gatherings. Brandon looked nervous but confident, his graduation gown pressed to perfection and his honor cords arranged with precision. He'd graduated summa cum laude from the business school, a summa laude achievement that would open doors throughout his professional life. Emma had worked just as hard in her social work program, though her career path would likely bring more personal satisfaction than financial reward. The graduates began assembling in the staging area at 9:30, their excitement palpable despite attempts at ceremonial dignity. Emma appeared in the procession line looking radiant, her cap perched carefully over hair she'd spent an hour perfecting that morning. The mortarboard and gown transformed her into something timeless, connecting her to generations of students who'd walked this same path toward their futures. She stood with her classmates from the social work program, animated in conversation about post-graduation plans and summer internships. Her face glowed with accomplishment and anticipation, unmarked by any sadness about my absence from the audience. The relief was evident, her day unburdened by worries about social awkwardness or family complications. From my position behind the stage curtains, I could observe both the graduate staging area and the audience seating. The juxtaposition struck me powerfully. Emma's authentic joy among her peers contrasted with the Wells family's more formal satisfaction in the premium seats they'd secured. Two different worlds, each celebrating the same achievement from vastly different perspectives. The ceremony began precisely at 10 o'clock with the traditional academic procession. Faculty members in elaborate robes led the way, their colorful hoods denoting advanced degrees and institutional affiliations. The graduates followed in disciplined rows, their faces serious with the weight of the moment. I watched Emma's section approach the auditorium, her step confident and her smile brilliant as she processed past hundreds of families. My radio crackled with routine updates as the ceremony unfolded. Lighting adjustments, microphone levels, crowd management notifications. The technical precision required to make such events appear effortless demanded constant attention from dozens of people working behind the scenes. I felt proud to be part of the team ensuring Emma's graduation proceeded without any complications. The keynote speaker, a distinguished alumni who'd built a nonprofit empire focused on educational equity, delivered remarks about service and social responsibility that seemed tailored to Emma's career aspirations. Her words about finding purpose through helping others resonated powerfully in the formal auditorium setting, validating the path Emma had chosen despite its modest financial prospects compared to Brandon's business trajectory. Individual college recognitions began at 11:15, each school presenting its graduates in alphabetical order. The business school went first, and I watched Brandon cross the stage with polished confidence, accepting his diploma with a firm handshake and practiced smile. The Wells family applauded enthusiastically from their prominent seats, Richard nodding with obvious satisfaction at his son's achievement. Emma's turn approached as the social work graduates prepared for their moment. My heart raced with anticipation and pride as her row moved toward the stage steps. This was the culmination of everything we'd worked for together. From elementary school homework sessions at our kitchen table to late-night phone calls during her most challenging semester. Emma Christine Mitchell. The dean's voice carried clearly through the auditorium sound system as my daughter stepped forward to receive her diploma. She walked across the stage with grace and confidence, her smile radiant as she shook hands with university officials and accepted the document that represented 4 years of academic dedication. I captured the moment with my small camera, the zoom lens allowing me to photograph her expression of pure joy and accomplishment. She paused at the center of the stage, diploma held high, and for just an instant her eyes seemed to scan the audience as if searching for someone. The moment passed quickly, but I wondered if some part of her was looking for me, despite our mutual agreement about the day's arrangements. The ceremony continued with graduate school recognitions and closing remarks, but my focus remained on Emma as she returned to her seat among classmates. Her face showed the complex emotions of major life transitions, excitement about future possibilities mixed with nostalgia for the chapter ending. She'd grown so much during her university years, developing from the uncertain teenager who left for college into the confident young woman now ready to make her mark on the world. As families began dispersing for individual celebrations, I helped coordinate the backstage breakdown while keeping one eye on the Wells family gathering in the auditorium lobby. Brandon and Emma posed for photographs with his parents, their body language formal but warm. Victoria Wells seemed genuinely fond of Emma, despite whatever reservations she might harbor about my background and social status. The contrast struck me again as I packed equipment cases and dismantled staging platforms. While Emma celebrated with Brandon's accomplished family in the elegant lobby, I worked among the crew members who'd made the ceremony possible, invisible but essential to its success. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had been present for every moment of her triumph, even though she believed I was home waiting for a phone call with highlights. Janet Chen approached as we finished the major breakdown tasks. "Great work today, Harry. You handled everything with real professionalism. We could use someone with your skills for our other major events if you're interested." The offer surprised me. "I appreciate that, Janet. This was important to me for personal reasons, but I've got my regular job at the community center." "Of course. But keep us in mind if your situation changes. Good people are hard to find in this business." By 2 o'clock, most families had departed for private celebrations, and the auditorium stood empty except for final cleanup crews. Emma's graduation was complete, her achievement officially recognized and celebrated by everyone who mattered in her new world. I'd witnessed it all from the shadows, a secret participant in the most important academic day of her life. Driving home through familiar Portland neighborhoods, I felt the complex satisfaction of mission accomplished. Emma had gotten her perfect graduation day, unmarred by social complications or family tensions. I had been present for her moment of triumph, even if she'd never know it. The photographs in my camera would become treasured memories of the day my daughter's hard work culminated in academic success. The afternoon stretched ahead with its own challenges.
Emma would expect a phone call later, eager to share details of the ceremony and the celebration dinner with Brandon's family. I would listen with genuine enthusiasm, ask appropriate questions, and celebrate her achievement as if experiencing it secondhand rather than having witnessed every moment firsthand. But first, I needed to stop by the community center to check on a weekend program Rosa was running for local families. The contrast between my two worlds would be sharp, moving from the formal elegance of university graduation to the grassroots energy of neighborhood community building. Both environments had shaped my understanding of what mattered in life, though Emma was only beginning to appreciate the value of the latter. The newspaper truck was making its Saturday delivery rounds as I pulled into my apartment complex, tomorrow's edition already being distributed throughout the city. Neither Emma nor I could have imagined that Sunday morning's headlines would transform everything we thought we understood about my presence at her graduation, revealing connections between my community work and larger stories that would make both of us reconsider the meaning of pride, recognition, and the different ways people contribute to the world around them. Tonight, I would celebrate privately the memory of watching my daughter achieve her dreams. Tomorrow would bring revelations that neither of us saw coming. Sunday morning brought the gentle routine of coffee and newspaper that had anchored my weekends for decades. The Portland Tribune lay folded on my kitchen table, its headlines promising the usual mix of local politics, community events, and human interest stories that connected our city's diverse neighborhoods. I settled into my familiar chair with my first cup of coffee, savoring the quiet satisfaction of successfully witnessing Emma's graduation without disrupting her carefully planned celebration. The phone had rung twice the previous evening. Emma's first call came around 6, her voice bubbling with excitement as she described the ceremony details I already knew by heart. Her joy was infectious as she recounted walking across the stage, the weight of the diploma in her hands, the pride she felt representing her social work program. I listened with appropriate enthusiasm, asking questions about moments I'd photographed from the wings, maintaining the fiction that I'd experienced her triumph secondhand. The second call came near midnight, after the Wells family celebration dinner had concluded. Emma's tone had shifted subtly, carrying undertones of complexity I recognized from her childhood when she needed to process complicated emotions. The dinner had been elegant and successful, she reported, filled with accomplished guests and stimulating conversation about business opportunities and career networking.
But something in her voice suggested the evening had left her feeling more thoughtful than purely celebratory. Now, in the peaceful morning light, I unfolded the newspaper with the leisurely pleasure of someone whose most challenging task involved deciding whether to tackle yard work or visit the community center to check on weekend programming. The front page featured the expected graduation coverage, photographs of proud families and triumphant students that captured the universal joy of academic achievement. But my coffee cup froze halfway to my lips when I saw the large photograph dominating the lower half of the front page. There I was, clearly recognizable despite the grainy quality of what appeared to be a cell phone image, working behind the scenes at yesterday's graduation ceremony. The headline above the photograph read in bold letters, "Hidden Hero, Community Champion Harold Mitchell ensures perfect graduation day." My hands trembled as I read the article beneath the photograph. The story, written by reporter David Park, described my 20-year history of community organizing and advocacy work that had transformed neighborhoods throughout Portland. The piece detailed campaigns I'd led to establish affordable housing initiatives, my role in creating the community center's job training programs, and the successful fight to preserve green spaces threatened by commercial development. The article painted a picture of sustained activism and community leadership that I'd never discussed publicly, work I'd done because it needed doing rather than for recognition or credit. Park had somehow uncovered my involvement in dozens of initiatives that had improved life for thousands of Portland residents, connecting my current role at the community center with a legacy of social change that stretched back to my 20s. But the most stunning revelation came in the article's final paragraphs. The reporter had discovered that my behind-the-scenes graduation work was motivated by a personal connection to one of the graduates, though he didn't identify Emma specifically. The piece described my presence at the ceremony as an example of the quiet dedication that characterized my approach to community service, working invisibly to ensure others could succeed and celebrate. A photograph accompanying the article showed me from my activism days, standing at a podium during a city council meeting, passionately advocating for housing assistance programs. The contrast between that confident public speaker and the humble maintenance worker Emma knew would be startling to anyone who'd only seen one version of my life. My phone rang before I could fully process the implications of the newspaper coverage. Rosa's voice carried a mixture of excitement and concern that reflected my own confused emotions. "Harry, have you seen the Tribune this morning?" "I'm looking at it now." "Rosa, how did this happen? Who gave them this information?" "David Park called me yesterday afternoon asking about your background. Said someone had sent him a tip about your community work and your presence at the graduation. I thought it was routine follow-up on the center's volunteer programs." The reality settled over me like cold water. Someone had recognized me at the university and connected my current job with my past activism. The story was already out there, spreading through social media and email networks, reaching people who would forward it to friends and family members. "Emma doesn't know about any of this," I said, thinking through the implications. "She's going to be blindsided." "Harry, this is wonderful news. People should know about everything you've accomplished. You've spent 20 years helping others while staying completely anonymous." But I could only think about Emma's reaction. She'd worked so hard to manage the social dynamics of her graduation weekend, carefully balancing her relationship with Brandon's family against her love for me. This newspaper coverage would explode those careful arrangements, forcing conversations she'd tried to avoid. The phone rang again before Rosa and I finished talking. Emma's number appeared on my screen, and her voice when I answered carried a tone I'd never heard before. A mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been awe. "Dad, Brandon's father just called. He's holding the morning newspaper. Dad, there's a picture of you on the front page." "Emma, I can explain. You were at my graduation. You were working there, weren't you? And this article, it says you've been some kind of community leader for decades. Dad, what is this?" The conversation I dreaded was beginning, but not in any way I could have anticipated. The newspaper had forced revelations I'd planned to keep private forever, exposing work I'd done without seeking credit or recognition. "Yes, I was there yesterday. I wanted to see you graduate, and when you said I couldn't attend as family, I found another way to be present. Dad, this article makes you sound like some kind of hero. Housing programs, community organizing, advocacy work. Why didn't you ever tell me about any of this?" The question hung between us, loaded with years of miscommunication and assumptions. How could I explain that I'd kept quiet about my activism because she'd seemed increasingly embarrassed by my humble circumstances? How could I describe the choice to let her think less of me rather than complicate her new relationships with stories of past achievements? The work was important, but it was a long time ago. I didn't want to burden you with ancient history when you were building your own future. Burden me? Dad, according to this article, you've helped thousands of people. You've changed entire neighborhoods. Brandon's father is calling you a major community figure. He wants to meet with you about supporting some of his charitable initiatives. The irony was overwhelming. Richard Wells, who'd spent months viewing me as an embarrassment to be managed, was now eager to associate with the community organizer described in the newspaper's reporting. The same work I downplayed to avoid complicating Emma's social life had suddenly become a valuable connection in Brandon's world. "Emma, where are you right now?" "At Brandon's apartment. His whole family is here reading the article. They're all looking at me like I've been hiding some important secret about my father." I could picture the scene. The Wells family gathered around their morning newspaper, trying to reconcile the humble maintenance worker they dismissed with the community champion described in David Park's reporting.
Their confusion would mirror Emma's own shock at discovering dimensions of my life she'd never known existed. "I'm coming over," Emma continued. "We need to talk about this properly. And Dad, Brandon wants to apologize for how his family has treated you. They had no idea about your background." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the scattered newspaper pages, trying to process how completely the morning had transformed my carefully managed world. The secret presence at Emma's graduation had become public knowledge. The community work I'd deliberately kept private was now front-page news. The social complications Emma had tried so hard to avoid were about to multiply exponentially. But somewhere beneath the anxiety and confusion, I felt a strange sense of relief. The pretense was over. Emma would finally understand why I'd been content with my humble job, why I'd never seemed ambitious for conventional success, why community service and helping others had always mattered more to me than social status or financial advancement. The telephone rang continuously as word of the newspaper article spread through social media networks. Former colleagues from my organizing days, community members whose lives had been touched by various initiatives, and reporters seeking follow-up interviews. The quiet privacy I'd maintained for 2 decades was dissolving rapidly, replaced by the kind of public attention I'd deliberately avoided.
I dressed carefully for Emma's arrival, choosing the same khakis and polo shirt that had marked me as unremarkable in Brandon's world. But everything about those clothes would seem different now, transformed from symbols of limitation into the uniform of someone who'd chosen meaningful work over social climbing. The newspaper lay open on my kitchen table, the photograph of my younger self addressing a city council meeting, providing stark contrast to the maintenance worker Brandon's family had known. Soon, Emma would knock on my door, demanding explanations for 20 years of hidden history and choices I'd made to protect her from complications she'd never asked to avoid. The morning that had begun with simple coffee and routine newspaper reading was about to become the most important conversation of our relationship, one that would reshape everything Emma thought she knew about her father's life and the sacrifices he'd made for her future. Emma's knock came exactly 45 minutes after our phone conversation ended, 3 sharp raps that carried the urgency of someone who'd spent the drive over rehearsing difficult questions. When I opened the door, she stood holding a folded copy of the Tribune, her expression a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, and something that looked like newfound respect. She stepped inside without invitation, moving to the kitchen table where my own copy lay open to David Park's article. The photograph of my younger self at the city council podium seemed to command her attention, as if she were studying a stranger who happened to share my features. 20 years, Dad. 20 years of community organizing, and you never said a word. I poured her coffee in the mug she'd used since college visits, buying time to find the right words. The work mattered, but talking about it didn't. You were building your own life, making your own choices. But why hide it? This article makes you sound incredible. Housing initiatives, job training programs, advocacy work that helped thousands of people. Brandon's father spent an hour on the phone this morning trying to understand why we never mentioned your background. The pain in her voice cut deeper than any criticism could have. She wasn't angry about the deception. She was hurt by what she perceived as my lack of trust in her judgment and character. Emma, you've spent 2 years trying to fit into Brandon's world. Every time we talked, you seemed more concerned about how I might reflect on you socially. I didn't want to complicate that with stories about old battles and causes that might not matter to your new friends. She sat down across from me, her graduation gown from yesterday draped over the chair back like a reminder of all the achievements we'd celebrated and all the conversations we'd avoided. You let me think you were just a maintenance worker. I am a maintenance worker. The community organizing was a different chapter of my life. What I do at the center now, keeping things running so Rosa can focus on programming, that matters just as much as any speech I gave 20 years ago. Emma studied the newspaper photograph again, then looked at me with eyes that seemed to be seeing her father clearly for the first time in years. Brandon wants to come over this afternoon. His whole family wants to meet you properly now that they understand who you really are. The irony stung, but I tried to keep my voice neutral.
And who am I, exactly? Someone who's made a real difference in the world. Someone who chose meaningful work over recognition. Someone I should have been proud of instead of embarrassed by. Her words carried the weight of genuine remorse, but also a troubling implication that my worth had somehow increased because of newspaper validation rather than the daily choices I'd made for decades. Emma, I'm the same person I was yesterday morning. The only thing that's changed is what other people know about my past. But that's the point, Dad. I didn't know. My own father has this incredible history of helping people, and I never heard those stories because I was too busy worrying about what Brandon's parents might think of your job title.
She was crying now, quiet tears that spoke to deeper regrets than our recent social complications. This was about lost time, missed opportunities to understand each other, and the ways we'd both chosen silence over difficult conversations. The work I do at the community center grows out of everything I learned during those organizing years. Fixing broken equipment and maintaining clean spaces creates an environment where Rose's programs can succeed. It's all connected, Emma. None of it was wasted. But I made you feel ashamed of yourself. I acted like your job was something to hide instead of something to respect. I reached across the table and took her hands, feeling the tremor of emotion that reminded me of the little girl who used to confide her fears and dreams during bedtime conversations. You never made me ashamed. Concerned about your happiness, yes. Worried about social complications, absolutely. But never ashamed of honest work or the choices I've made. Brandon's family spent yesterday evening reading about your housing advocacy online. His father called you a visionary. His mother wants to invite you to join some nonprofit board she's involved with. They're treating you like some kind of celebrity. The transformation was complete. Richard Wells, who'd viewed me as an embarrassment 24 hours earlier, was now eager to associate with the community organizer revealed in the newspaper. The same history I downplayed to avoid complicating Emma's relationships had become a valuable social asset. What do you want to do about their invitation? Emma wiped her eyes with a tissue, smearing the careful makeup she'd applied for what she'd expected to be a confrontational conversation. I want you to come to dinner tonight, not as the maintenance worker they tolerated, but as my father, the man who taught me that helping others matters more than helping yourself. And Brandon? How does he feel about these revelations? Embarrassed mostly, he realizes he judged you based on superficial things instead of trying to understand who you really are. He wants to apologize, and he wants to learn about your community work. The afternoon brought a parade of visitors I hadn't expected. Rosa arrived with flowers and tears, followed by several community center board members who'd seen the article and wanted to discuss expanding my role in upcoming programs. Former colleagues from my organizing days called to reconnect, and neighbors stopped by to congratulate me on the recognition. The attention felt overwhelming after decades of deliberately avoiding public credit for community work. But underneath the discomfort, I recognized an opportunity to bridge the gap between my two worlds, to help Emma understand how the values we'd shared during her childhood had shaped everything I'd done since. Brandon arrived at 5 o'clock, dressed casually but carrying himself with the careful posture of someone approaching an important negotiation. His handshake was firm, his eye contact direct, and his first words carried genuine humility. "Mr. Mitchell, I owe you an apology. I judged you unfairly and I treated you with disrespect. After reading about your work in the community, I realize I completely misunderstood who you are and what you've accomplished. Thank you, Brandon. What matters now is moving forward with better understanding. My parents want to host dinner tonight if you're willing. Nothing elaborate, just family conversation and a chance to start over with honest appreciation for each other." Emma stood beside Brandon, her face bright with hope and anticipation.
The social nightmare she'd feared had transformed into an opportunity for genuine connection between the two parts of her life she'd struggled to reconcile. "I'd be honored to join you for dinner." As we prepared to leave for the Wells family home, Emma linked her arm through mine with the natural affection I remembered from her childhood. The distance between us was closing, not because of newspaper recognition, but because we'd finally spoken honestly about pride, shame, and the different ways people choose to make their mark on the world. The maintenance worker they'd dismissed was the same community organizer they now wanted to celebrate. Emma's embarrassment had given way to pride, not in my hidden achievements, but in my consistent choice to put service above recognition, family above status, and genuine contribution above social climbing. Tonight would bring new conversations and deeper understanding. The newspaper headline had opened doors that years of careful social navigation couldn't unlock, but the real victory was simpler and more important. A father and daughter finding their way back to the love and respect that had sustained them through 22 years of shared dreams and individual growth. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.